All right, welcome. In this video, I'm going to develop a battle map. In this case, I'm making a battle map for a ship that my players in my campaign, my D&D campaign, have bought, a few sessions ago, and they're living on it during their pirate arc. And so I'm probably going to have some battles on it, so I wanted to build it. And in the last few sessions, they've had some opportunity, some downtime to sort of upgrade it a little bit, sort of personalize it. That gave me enough inspiration to actually just build the ship. So what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to build out the actual frame of the ship to get started. And I'm using some of the assets. I'm pretty familiar with these assets. I've been using Inkarnate for a couple of years now. I've been using the wall assets. I use these wooden wall assets a lot for buildings and such. And I've added these rope fences to make it a little bit more ship-like here. And then I'm using these stairs as well to get things set up. And again, as I mentioned, I'm just trying to frame out the ship a little bit before I get to any decoration. And I'm actually working off of an image. There's a token that we've been using for our overland travel and such. And since we've already been using that as our, the basis of the ship that we're using, I thought it would be best to use that to model this. Also, I'm not super creative on my own, so, I wouldn't know how to make the proper dimensions of a ship and make this curve right. For instance, I'm looking off of an image to try and get the curve to match what they had vaguely. And as you can see, what I'm doing for this curve is I'm just taking the little wall pieces. I've actually used the little ones here, and I've rotated them. You can use the built-in Inkarnate rotation buttons that will rotate you 15 degrees, and I usually like to rely on that because I'm lazy. But the first two you see there, I actually rotated at 5 degrees instead, since I wanted this curve to look kind of right. And I do that often using the straight pieces slightly rotated each time you place it to make it kind of look curved if one of the curved pieces isn't the right curvature for you. Now I'm starting to do a little bit of decoration, but still just trying to kind of frame out. I'm thinking about the battle map itself, how a battle might occur on this map. So I thought it would be fun and interesting to have the little steering wheel thing here up to be raised on a platform, probably 5 feet up, so a couple stairs to get up there, as you can see. And I'm actually using these table assets to try and make the floor of this raised platform. And once I get up there, it starts inspiring me. I'm like, well, maybe the captain's up here. He's going to need, he or she's going to need a table there. And I've put I've got the idea, maybe you put your spyglass on there, or your, whatever you use to navigate and travel, maybe a couple maps with some paperweights on there so it won't blow away. I didn't actually add any decoration. I thought I might, but I just put a little tablecloth on there to make it look a little fancier. And you can see I adjusted the brightness on both of those assets to both make them contrast with the floor, but also to make them not stand out so brightly against other things that didn't look quite so bright. Now I'm doing a little bit of decoration. Usually I'll frame out first and decorate last. I'm not going to finish all of the decoration, but again, the reason I'm sort of doing some of the decoration here is I'm thinking about the actual battle. I like this little grate thing here that could be retracted or opened in the battle, so you could jump down to the lower level, things like that. I want lots of areas where there's a good reason to move about, things like that. One thing I discovered here is this little grid painting tool I'm using. I like to use the paintbrush to try and get some contrast. So I've got one version of the slats going right to left, and then I sort of rotate them, darken them a little bit. I think I made them a little smaller to make it look like that's, the lower level down there. By accident, I deleted that. But again, it's really easy to paint in the grid. I actually used the grid to build my map, but I actually will usually turn the grid off when I actually export the map, because I will import it into Foundry. That's what I use, but if you use Roll20 or some other tool, they almost always will project their own grid on there. And I think it's kind of awkward having grids on top of grids. So I like having just sort of a plain exported image, import that in, and then use my virtual tabletop to put the grid right on top. But it's great for guidelines when I'm building it, so that I know, I want things placed in locations where my players can also run and so on. So if I place an obstacle, I like to put it right in the square, not sort of in some awkward overlapping place where it will be hard to adjudicate. So now I'm trying to get to the bow. I think now I've really embraced the framing it out before I get further. Again, I've used this technique, use this to build city walls, use this to build, buildings and such, castles and whatnot. So I've used this technique a lot of just grabbing the different wall shapes. I tend to use the long ones as much as I can, and then I just fill in with the short ones where I can't. Usually overlapping them it looks just fine. So you can overlap them almost however much you like, just try and line them up properly. Now that I've got this, I'm checking out my sea assets, the ship assets. What are the things that Inkarnate has built in? I see these cannonballs and stuff. I'm looking. I want to get to those, but usually that's a later stage. So when I build the maps, you build the frame, then you start wanting to build things. When I say frame, I mean like the walls and the doors and things like that. Once you have that basic shape, you can start putting in the next thing I'll put in are like rugs and tables, things that, some stamps need to be on top of other stamps. So the rugs come in next, then the tables go on top of them. Of course, you can always adjust that later, but if you do it in the right order, you don't have to filter with layers as much. Here I'm starting to decorate out the back. I put those boats in. I decided I wanted them a little bigger. Now I'm trying to think of how the anchor works. I don't really know much about boats, but I've watched some pirate shows and I know there should be some anchors back there. So I put those little steering wheels in to like haul the anchor back on. Again, just painting out with my brush tool. I opted for the same pattern as I used above, and you can see the contrast isn't that great there. It's often better, just make it a little brighter, like I said, just change it a little bit, adds a little extra contrast. It makes it easier for your players to realize, okay, there's an actual change of elevation there or whatever it might be. I think the stairs kind of carry that too, hopefully, but it would have been better if I added a little extra contrast there. I had to make some decisions about where to place those stairs because I realized, I need to have a mast. Also, remember to save on Inkarnate. It's very easy, especially if you're new, to hit the back button or something like that and really mess it up, lose all your data. Inkarnate will usually warn you before you do that, but every once in a while I'll pop up and say, hey, you should save. Usually I do that when it tells me. Here I'm using some of the wall assets just to build this cool little mast object, and then I went quick there obviously in the replay, but I grouped all those objects together into one object, then I copied it and I pasted it for my second mast as well. And a little bit later on I'll make a third smaller mast over here in the bow as well. Now I've got pretty much all my brushwork done, so I've painted out the ship, which means now it's time to start decorating. And again, I start with the bigger objects, like these boats, tables, so on, and try and break up the space a little bit. I think the bow of a ship, again, I'm no sailor, I think it usually slopes up a bit, so I'm sort of got maybe it's got a rope off there, and I thought, hey, how about maybe highlight that difference? As you can see here, again, rotate the planks and then color them differently, brighten them. In that case, I went saturation really low, which kind of makes them grayish, and then put the brightness up to make it kind of a white gray. And I like to use all those sliders. Hue gets you different colors, so if you like have a couch that's blue and you want it to be purple, you can move the hue slider. Saturation does sort of, if you move it down, it makes it more grayish. If you move it up, it makes some more vibrant colors. And then brightness is probably straightforward, bright or dark. And then the contrast, same thing, is kind of harder to understand, but it's kind of like the saturation. The contrast makes the difference between the colors a little bit more brighter. The contrast, I guess. Now I'm putting in my cannons. Cannons are going to be important. My players have spent some time, getting some cannons from, some of their NPC allies and such, and making sure they have cannons on their ship. I know they want to go out and blast some other pirates and pirate hunters and such. So we've got the cannons, and on their ship right now they have 4. So I thought, hey, I put 4. And again, I put these little rope things. I don't know how cannons really work, but I think they got a big blowback. So on a ship, you need something to catch them so they don't roll away and kill someone. So I have this idea of these ropes on some little cranks, and then just putting some decorations in. You see I'm plopping rope around. I'm like, hey, ropes. You're on a sailing ship. You probably need ropes. I'm finding just all the little assets. Here are some assets I love, which are my crates. There's some really good crate ones. If you want to make anything, a storage room, factory, warehouse, anything, look a little bit more, real, and to give some things for your players to run around, jump on, look inside when they're looting the place. I love the crate assets. You can see I got the barrel assets as well. It's another great one, crates and barrels. And then the last one I like to use is the sack asset. Also a great one for decorating, like I said, taverns, all kinds of things, kitchens. So we got the sack here. We've got some sacks. There's probably more decoration assets that I could be using as well. There's one called box that's also pretty useful, and then there's specialized crates and crates with food in them. You'll see I'll use that in a different part of the ship. But these general ones, as you can see, kind of make it look nice, give you something obstacles to get around. Looks like I'm getting to the end. I left this to the end, which are sails, and I wanted to put some sails on, but in the actual asset that we use already, the sails cover most of the ship, and you can't see the actual squares underneath. So as you can see here, I'm trying to put them on an opacity. I had them on 50%, and I think I brought them down to like 1/3. Just enough to be like, oh yeah, there are sails there. Maybe if my players want to climb up them for their swashbuckling or whatever, at least they know there's rigging and such up there. But I put them on really low opacity so that we can see everything beneath when we're running around. Now I grabbed all those assets. I used the built-in Inkarnate select everything from this tile set, I think, or something like that. So it won't just select all the walls, but not just the walls of that one stamp, but all of the walls from that set of stamps. And I just copied them, and then I pasted them so I didn't have to redo all that. And as you can see, I'm trying to just rebuild it a little bit. This is for the lower deck, of course, and in this case, the lower deck probably should be smaller. I'm guessing that's how ships work, but we're in a fantasy world, and this is intended to be a battle map, so I wanted to have lots of space so my players could fill it up with stuff. So it actually ends up being a little bit bigger, but now I can use this space to build out what I wanted in my ship. So there are a few things I needed here. Obviously, we're going to need some sleeping quarters for the crew, and we have 20 crew plus a couple officers, and then of course the party. So we got about 30 folks on the ship. We need a captain's quarters, and then I've told my players that they have 4 holds in the ship, and I'm thinking to myself, I need to have 4 holds. One of those holds they've turned into a magic lab. One is full of food, and the other 2 are empty at the moment. So I'm using that in the back of my mind to think, okay, I should probably have these 4 cargo hold areas. And then it turned out that I couldn't really split them into 4. I guess I could have done a better attempt to do that. I ended up just making 2, a back one and a forward one. And then I just thought in my mind they're sort of split into the port and starboard side hold. So what we've got here is sort of the captain's quarters at the very back there. I was trying to line it up with what I had also above, so that when they transfer from above to the lower deck, everything's sort of in the place you would expect it to be. And so I usually expect these captain's quarters are at the back. And here's where I decided I was going to do the anchor. I thought I was going to put it on the lower level, and then when I realized that's where the captain's quarters were, I said, well, I guess these go out on the main level. And when I plopped them down there, I put them on a lower layer so they would go underneath the wall, so it looks like they're sticking out, like they're ready to be dropped when at the order. Now here's the captain's quarters. One thing I've also, again, that we've had some role playing on this ship already. They, when they were buying it, they kind of wanted to make sure, are there some secret compartments? And sure enough, there is a secret compartment in the captain's quarters, I told them. And so that's why I put those little sort of secret areas, or areas that don't have any way to get in them. There's going to be some secret doors. And in one of them, I'm going to put, well, as my players have already decided, they're going to put their special chest. It's called a banker's chest, that will hold all their gold in it. And there you go, I've put it in there. Holds all their gold so that they don't have to keep track of it. And they wanted that hidden away so the rest of the pirates on their ship can't steal it. So they've got that in their secret compartment. And I thought maybe they've got other special things in there they might want to keep hidden. So they got a couple sacks full of, other treasure things that should be in the secret spot. Otherwise, I'm pretty much into the decorating phase, and decorating these rooms is something I've done so many times. Almost every battle map I make has a bedroom, and so it's a bed, it's a couple bedside tables. I usually put a desk in there with a chair. Then how about somewhere where they can eat some breakfast? And there you go. And what else do you need in there? I like the idea that maybe wealthy folks have a chest where they keep, their fancy stuff, and then of course a couple of chest of drawers and things like that to keep your clothes. A couple other decorations. Sometimes I put, things down on the tables and such. But I was actually kind of trying to move through this pretty quickly. So, but you can put down books and papers and pens and other things just to liven up that space a little bit. Trying to move on to the forward hold now. Again, the middle space I've decided is probably going to be the living space. And here's another great asset for just breaking up a battle map a little bit, is this sort of, I don't know, it's just a wooden pillar that I usually use in larger spaces like warehouses, taverns, and so on, just as a support beam that you imagine is needed for whatever structure you're in. But again, it just gives something to hide behind, something to knock down, things that your players can interact with. And for my purposes, I thought, well, these are going to be great places to put, some kind of crates around. Now here you see I put this big magical teleporter. Well, the last thing my players did was they got one of their wizard ally friends who they had done a service for, who owed them a service, and said, hey, is there anything you want us to do? And they said, hey, can you make a teleportation circle in our ship so that we can teleport there if we ever need to? And sure enough, he said, yeah, that sounds great. So he went and put that in there. Now you can see I'm making the sleeping area for the crew. I set up some of those hammocks. I thought that was perfect. Attach them to the beams. That seemed like that worked out well. I could have put more beams in and more hammocks, but I thought maybe some of the folks sleep on the ground. I'm using the random rotation on the stamp here just to make it look a little bit more, I'm a pretty symmetrical kind of person, and some of my maps end up looking a little bit too organized. But having that little bit of randomness on there helps it just sort of pop out a bit. And here's the other part that they've made. As I mentioned, one of them is this magic lab. They've also put this cage. They have a plan to siphon some negative energy from some undeads that they're going to summon. So they've got this cage. They're going to try and summon undead in it. We'll see how that plan goes, right? But they've made this lab. This is their alchemical lab. We have an artificer, and we have, they like to make potions and things. So they've got, wherever they have their hideout of the the week, they usually have some kind of lab setup where they can make potions and tinker and make other things. So that's what's going on out there. Now I realize there's this globe, another great thing to have in the captain's quarters. You notice I put a map on the desk there. I put the little ink well. Once I started getting into those stamps, I'm like, all right, I might as well put a few extra little decorations in the captain's quarter. I thought that map is perfect, obviously. It's almost made for that. I love doing this. Put a couple rotated pieces of paper on there, throw an open book on top of it. Wow, it looks like it's a wizard. Put a little ink pen on there. You know, this is where the wizard's at work, right? I'll do that little arrangement on my desk. This just sort of signifies that, hey, this is a wizard desk, or this, you know, if they're looting this area, this is obviously my player's area, so they know what this stuff is. But if they're looting this area, I like to put these into my map so that my players can say, oh, gee, what's in this box? What's over here? And sometimes I've got it in my notes. Other times I'm like, oh, gee, I don't know, but I put the chest here on purpose because I wanted to put something in there. You can see I'm filling up some of these boxes and stuff with these gears. These are great little assets because my players are, like I said, an artificer who likes to tinker and build little mechanical devices. So I'm going to steal some of these steampunk assets here just to, you know, they don't usually, we're not in a steampunk universe, but sometimes those assets still come in handy. Here's the little potion station. They like to make healing potions mostly, so I put it with the healing red, of course, default red for healing. Put some magic. They also are trying to make the Philosopher's Stone a real powerful magical item, and they've got some of the pieces together. So here again, fiddling with the sliders to make this little mat. Looks like I'm going to put some gems on it so that this is where they're working on some of that part with the Philosopher's Stone. And you know, there's some cool gems in here that you can just plop down. I went ahead and I put these assets on as small as I can get them, which is I think size 10. Same thing with the sacks here for little gem pouches and such, component pouches. Make them as small as I can make them, even though when I'm editing here they kind of look blurry. When you export it on high def, they will all pop out really clearly, even at that very small size. So don't worry about that. Again, using crates just to fill in the space a little bit. I imagine personal effects of my sailors might be stored in here, maybe community items, things like that. Just trying to fill up the space again, things for my players to use if they need in a battle. There's actually space for 2 more cannons on this ship. I've told my players that, but they haven't actually got some cannons yet for it. So I'm going to put some invisible, or like I did with the sails, sort of faded out cannons, just sort of indicating to my players, here's where the cannons could go. At the moment, though, this is the hold, and this is, I decided this is where we've got our food. And so, of course, what do sailors eat? Probably lots of fish, so I'm going to use a lot of these fish crates. You can see I've got a number of these assets. I'm using normal crates, fish crates, other food crates, meat crates. I've got even some fruit, and in a second I'll find some veggie crates. And of course I've got some, what else do we need when we're sailing? We need something to drink. Wine, rum, whiskey, yo-ho-ho, and so on. Ale. I decided, hey, we need some rain barrels up on the deck to capture water, and then also some water barrels underneath, and then maybe extra beer and ale and such for when we run out of the current ones. Wall off the front there again, maybe it's got a little, you know, it's hard to navigate up there, so we just make it safer. Don't go into that space. And then again, the lower holds here are supposed to be empty, but I still need something in those spaces, so I put some crates and sacks and such. Just they're mostly all empty, I imagine. And here's the last step, of course. Our ship's called Jewel of the Crown, and I wanted to first select a font. And then I don't like how the of the was too big there in the middle, and so I decided, why don't I split this into 3 chunks and edit their size a little bit. And here I'm just fiddling until it looks kind of right. how I like it. And then as a backdrop, I love to use these desks. Just go find a desk, fancy desk. They kind of look like cool backdrops. Curve the letters a little bit. Give it a little curvature of 5, I think. And bingo, Jewel of the Crown. And that's the ship. Thanks for watching.